Rahul Gandhi supposedly raised it in the parliament, but I'm afraid he did not do his homework. There were lines of stretchers, with the wounded groaning and crying in pain, and he said, why aren't they being evacuated? And he was told, sir, there is just nobody to evacuate them. While you are in the service, you are not allowed to marry. You may offer a very nice second career. What about the first career? He went to Nehru with plans for the expansion and modernization of the Indian army. To his shock, horror and dismay, he was told by Nehru, General, I don't need an army. I just need the police. 60 into 3 is 1,80,000. So over 3 years, the armed forces of India have been reduced by 1,80,000 men. With Agniveers, you brought that number down to 43,000. How will you militarize this manpower? Armies are required to fight to their death if required. Their operational efficiency is just not negotiable on the battlefield. Please like, share and subscribe to Chanakya Dialogues. The Agniveer Scheme had brought about a paradigm shift in the recruitment pattern of the armed forces. It was a major disruption from the practices of the past. So I'd like to cover this very seminal issue under first a bit of the historical backdrop, then I'll quickly get on to the genesis, then the scheme per se, an analysis, and then recommendations for what can be done to improve this scheme, make it better. So, historically, India has always had huge armed forces. From the time of the Mauryas, we had 6,90,000 armed forces. At the population levels of that time, they would be equivalent of about 3 to 4 million now. They had 9,000 war elephants, with the help of which they had unified the whole of India as a political entity for the first time, the Mauryan Empire. Next major consolidation of India, unification of India, comes with the Mughals. And under Akbar, the size of the Mughal army was increased to 2.5 million. Why? He found that there was a lot of surplus military manpower, recruitable RMP, recruitable male population in India, which especially in the non-harvesting season, non-sowing season, etc., it was ready and free to go to whoever was willing to pay, right? He wanted to suck out this RMP factor from the Indian subcontinent of South Asia, and he said the safest way is to get them in my employ. So then they can't go to any other chief or chieftain and wage revolts, oblique rebellions against me. 2.5 million. Then we come to the era of the British Indian Army, firstly the company armies, etc. They were also around at the greatest, they had gone to 80,000 to 1 lakh. But at the time of the First World War, the British Indian Army was expanded rapidly to the size of 1.3 million, quite close to the present size, and it was sent to all theatres of the First World War in Western Europe, in Africa, East Africa, and in the Middle East. These were the three major spheres that we fought in. Come down to largest all-volunteer army in the history of the world at 2.5 million men, 25 lakh soldiers in arms. They fought against the Germans, they fought against the Italians, they fought against the Japanese and won. So when the British were handing over, they rapidly downsized the British Indian Army to about 3,80,000, and they divided between India and Pakistan. Quite obviously, when the first British chief of the Indian Army, of the Independent Indian Army post 47, General Sir Roy Butcher, he went to Nehru with plans for the expansion and modernization of the Indian Army. To his shock, horror and dismay, he was told by Nehru, General, I don't need an army. I just need the police. No country in the world will ever attack a peaceful, non-violent, ahimsa spouting India. famous last words. How famous we got to know in 1962. But the simple fact is that right from 47, 48 itself, Pakistan attacked us in Jammu and Kashmir. Then we had to liberate Hyderabad. Then we had to liberate Goa. And then, of course, we were hit by the Chinese and taught a very long overdue lesson in real politics. So the simple fact is that the Indian Army was then again, increased to 850,000, 10 mountain divisions were added, and then as requirements arose, Pakistan 65 war came, etc., and we found that we were still short. So overall, then we expanded to the present size of 1.2 million men. We expanded to the size of 1.2 million men, where we stabilized. Why did we need 1.2 million men? Because we had a two and a half front threat. You see? And that is where we come to the genesis of this problem. The Agniveer scheme idea is not new, by the way. There has always been a strong, vocal section in the Indian Army which felt that the Indian Army had too much flab, that there were too much manpower, which was a sheer waste of money, that they were a drag on the state's economy kind of a thing, and that we must cut manpower and we must transfer money from the revenue budget to the capital budget for weapons acquisition, right? And this problem had reached salience around the time of General V.P. Malik, just before the Kargil conflict. Please don't forget, 1990, the Soviet Union had collapsed. Our source of cheap weapons, subsidized weapons, had dried up. All of a sudden, we had problems of finding spares, etc., in the chaotic conditions in the post-Soviet state. And then the Indian economy came close to collapse. And Prime Minister Narasimha Rao told General Malik in unequivocal terms, sorry General, we have no money to give you now. Once the Indian economy improves, we are now revving up the Indian economy, only then will you get money. And General Malik was aghast, quite obviously. He wanted to carry out modernization, get new weapons, new tanks, etc. He was aghast, and then he came up with the proposal that, okay, we will suppress manpower and give us that revenue budget that you were going to give us, give it to us as capital budget, and so that we can buy weapons and equipment. Unfortunate point was we got no additional capital budget, you see. But manpower was first suppressed by 50,000, then another 50,000, and we were on a manpower cutting spree. The way to get a VSM was to suggest a unit which you could do away with. And I was unfortunately or fortunately at that time our director, MO5, which deals with these particular aspects and issues, and I was horrified because I had just come back from Kargil. My unit had fought. I had lost 6 men killed, 21 wounded, and to get every one man down we needed 18 to get him down from 14, 15, 16,000 feet down to 7,000 feet where the helipads were. That was the problem. And I was horrified as to how we would fight in the mountains with these kind of severe manpower cuts. But there was that cutting spree, and 6 pioneer companies done away with, Mules Mountain Artillery, MA done away with, Mules General Service, GS done away with, and the Kargil war, fortunately for us, started. General Malik, to his credit, used to go every second, third day to the forward lines, front lines, to get a feel of the situation for himself. And when he landed up there in the fighting, he found that there were lines of stretchers, with the wounded groaning and crying in pain. And he said, why aren't they being evacuated? And he was told, sir, there is just no body to evacuate them. He said, who is to evacuate them early? He said, the pioneers, which have been disbanded. Now either the people fight, a platoon there are about 25, 30 men, either they fight or they get these boys down, the dead and the wounded. And the mules are also gone, MA, GS, all gone. So they'll have to, there is no option now. To his credit, he came right back to the Military Operations Directorate and in a great temper, he ordered straight away that the disbandment orders be cancelled. So, of the famous manpower suppression exercise, this was the result. It did not survive the shock of one real kinetic combat experience. Not one shock it could take, this manpower cutting exercise. And after the end of the Kargil war, we had a severe problem. Units that had field peace profile was totally disrupted of the infantry. Infantry units that had served Nagaland, Manipur, Mizoram, Assam, etc. They came to peace stations in Darjeeling, Kalimpong or in Dharamshala, and they were sent straight to Kashmir, straight to J&K, because we needed every man jack. And over a period of time, this can take a toll, because you do need to come down to a peace station to attend to your ailing parents, marry your sisters, daughters, put your children in education. All that was disrupted. So at the end of the Kargil war, I was still in the MO Directorate, and fortunately the DGMO was General Vij, who I had served with him personally earlier. And the simple fact is that we told him, sir, we desperately need more. Forget cutting manpower. We need more. And he wholeheartedly agreed, and then we raised 36 new battalions of RR, 36 new battalions of RR, and 6 force headquarters and about 10 odd sector headquarters. We had to raise them because they were bloody well needed. And that is the time at which the BSF had asked for 140 more battalions, the CRPF had asked for 180 more battalions. So all that money that we were trying to save on manpower as far as the army was concerned, 5 times that was going to be spent on the manpower of the CPOs, which would have been enlarged. And I'm sorry, there is that tendency of empire building which was there, and what was needed was not being given. The first manpower cutting exercise did not survive the shock of kinetic combat. That is one important historical background I must share with you. And once again, in the time of when Raksha Mantri Parikar Saab was in chair, God bless his soul, a wonderful Raksha Mantri that we had. And one of the generals who was close to him, then again, who was from this cut the manpower lobby, useless people, kick them out, send them home, etc. He had his ear, and there was another manpower flap cutting exercise. And then, you see, the horror of horrors came during COVID. COVID, for 3 years, all recruitment to the army was, armed forces, was stopped. Every year, 60,000 people retire, right? And we have to recruit 60,000 to keep the army at the existing level, armed forces. 60 into 3 is 1,80,000. So, over 3 years, the armed forces of India have been reduced by 1,80,000 men. There is a zany concept that the Indian armed forces are too damn big. They are not required. They must be cut down. We are almost going back to what Nehru told the first British chief of the Indian army, Roy Butcher. I don't need an army. I'm sorry, that is dangerously irrational thinking. We don't need an army in the present day and age. I have nothing more to say. But that was the case. 3 years, no recruitment, army cut by 1,80,000. And then somebody sprung the idea of this tour of duty to General Naravne. And now there is a fair amount of controversy about what he said or didn't say, etc., etc. His book, I understand, has been banned. But the fact is that he thought, his initial impression, I'm given to understand, and was that it was an initial, it was a small add-on, adjunct to the existing recruitment system. Some young people from the universities, colleges would be taken in a NAM tour of duty kind of a thing for a short term and then sent back. And but suddenly, I don't know where the whole process underwent a major change. And the change was that we now had the Agniveer Scheme. we would drastically overhaul the recruitment system to the armed forces. The Americans have a saying, if a thing ain't broke, don't fix it. Unfortunately, we found that the one institution that has been working fabulously, was respected all over the country and the world, was the Indian Armed Forces. And everybody took out their knives to reform the Indian Armed Forces, to transform the Indian Armed Forces. The Americans have done away with divisions, we must do away with divisions. Americans have done this, Americans are going for tech, they don't go for manpower. I'm sorry. The problems of the Americans are drastically different from our problems. They have Mexico and Canada as neighbors. We have China and Pakistan, and we have terrorists operating within our country and Maoists operating within our country and insurgents. We need manpower. We always have, historically. That is why you must look at your own strategic culture and not come into a copycat culture. You see, the fact is that we were told that the Agniveers, somehow I think people at the highest level were convinced that this is a damn good scheme. It will spread military skills in the entire Indian population. Wonderful thought. But how? Previously, 60,000 men were retiring every year. They could not cause a diffusion of military skills all over the Indian population of 1.4 billion. 60,000 men were a drop in the ocean. With Agniveers, you brought that number down to 43,000. How will you militarize this manpower? What manpower? You are creating a problem for the army, the armed forces which are now there. So, the new scheme, and in the context of Indian military history, it was a radical departure from the past. Radical departure from the past. So, when you undertake it, you have to have a very good reason. What was the government's reason? As we understand it, we were told that the pay bill of the Indian Armed Forces is 1,06,000 crores annual, right? Which includes the defense civilians also, I am told. The pension bill is 1,11,000 crores, includes 40,000 civilian defense, Ministry of Defense pensioners, right? And quite obviously we were told with horror that this is unsustainable and we have to do away with it. In the CPOs, Central Police Organizations, these were done by doing away with pension. They said you'll sort of cut your DSOP and the government will add equal amount and that's what you get. No pension. Now the same thing could have been done for the armed forces, but there are historical legacies to the one rank, one pension struggle and this and that. So this was not done for the armed forces, but then they did something far worse. They said, we'll introduce the Agniveer scheme. You will be recruited for 4 years, and at the end of 4 years, you will be sent out with about a package of 40 to 50 lakhs. You can start a business, you can become a startup, you can become this, that. I'm not very sure how many businesses you can start with 40 lakhs. But the fact of the matter is that this was done. So, to sum up the salient points of the Agniveer scheme, you were taken in for 4 years. At the end of 4 years, you would be let out, no pension, no medical benefits, no canteen benefits, etc. You would get about 40 to 50 lakhs in hand, out of which you had contributed your DSOP every month. It was cut. You start with 30,000 and you go up to 40,000. Initially, they were giving you a lower pay than a home guard. I mean, this kind of tight-fistedness, I just fail to understand what is your angst against the armed forces. And then when you go out, there was the problem of your resettlement. Now, the government worked very hard, apparently, to get you a very good second career in terms of getting 10% in the paramilitary forces, 10% in the CPOs, etc., and some government jobs. and then they said they would go to the banks and the private sector, get you bank guard duties, but bank guards just pay you 20,000. So you earn 40,000, then you come back to 20,000. While you are in the service, you are not allowed to marry, right? You're not allowed to marry, and then when you come out, you are supposed to start family and schooling and for your children, etc., with half the pay that you were getting earlier. There are anomalies with this scheme. I think it was pushed through in too great a hurry. As it is, 3 years we had stopped recruitment, so there was that panic that people, the armed forces were, without manpower, without replacement manpower, and then it was just pushed through in a hurry. So the fact of the matter is, 4 years service out on the roads, you might get a good second career. You were promised a good second career. How much that works, how much the state governments go by what the central government is saying, all remains to be seen when the first batch of Agniveers will finish their tenure of duty, their tour of duty, and will be out on the streets looking for their second job. What are the lacunas with this scheme? The obvious ones are as follows. You may offer a very nice second career. What about the first career? The simple fact is, I ask you a simple question. You are a boy in a village. You have the opportunity, the chance to join CISF, BSF, CRPF, ITBP. Once in, you serve for 58 years. Who will then like to join the army where after 4 years you don't know what the hell will become of you? He would prefer these. The counter argument was, look, people are coming. My dear sir, they are coming because there is a desperation for jobs. You advertise a sweeper's post and people with PhD degrees, engineering degrees will opt for that because there is a shortage of jobs. So people will come. But the problem is the better ones will go to the CPOs first before they come to the army. So it's anybody's case that you are prepared to accept weak links in the army, dregs, leftovers in the army, but you are very concerned about the CPOs. They also need good people, but so do the armed forces. They are your cutting edge, they are your insurance policy against China, Pakistan and whatever else that might get thrown against you. So that was one major lacuna, that the second career, we'll make it very good, pie in the sky. What about the first career? For the villages, the youth in the villages, the army was a very respectable career, sought after career. He was a sought after bridegroom. People were happy in the villages to give their daughters to army men. I mean, not anymore. Not anymore. He is no longer an army man by the time he is out. So, the kind of reputational loss to the armed forces as an attractive career, it has to compete with other to draw the best talent, to draw its share of the higher ability levels. And now I'm afraid in the race you are the last. Between the police, the CPOs, the paramilitary forces, you put the armed forces at the bottom of the heap. That's number one. Number two, the basic problem is more than saving money. You have to look at the operational efficiencies. Armies are required to fight to their death if required. Their operational efficiency is just not negotiable on the battlefield. Whatever you may do to, otherwise accountant generals would have been army, navy and air chiefs. They would have made the best. They are the best at cost cutting and kicking out extra manpower, flab, etc. But accountant generals have not been made generals for very good reasons. So the fact of the matter is, operational efficiency wise, 4 years is simply too short a tenure in which you can absorb, that man can be absorbed into his unit, can be encultured, can be integrated, can learn what is there and become an effective soldier on the battlefield. In my time, when I joined the armed forces, just before the 71 war, the soldier had a color service of just 7 years, which was designed to keep the army young. And we had a young army. We had COs who had 32, 33 years of service. My first CO was fitter than most of his other colleagues and even some Jawans. So the fact of the matter is that 4 years is simply too short to integrate. The problem becomes worse compounded with crew served weapons. In a tank, there is a crew of 3 to 4. In an artillery gun, there may be a crew of 6 to 8, depending on what kind of a gun. More modern guns, automated, have lesser crews, but never less than 3. So a crew has to serve together, integrate together, and create that coordination between themselves, that talmel as it is called. And the strength of a chain is the weakest link. If every few months one boy is going to be replaced by another, that crew, the efficiency of that crew would be the weakest link. I'm sorry, that is the way it is. So you have to think of crew served weapons and the effect of crew served weapon on this short term manning. Russia-Ukraine war, these short term conscripts were found to be the weakest link in the chain. Their performance was the worst of all. It was subpar at times, both armies, Ukrainian as well as this thing. Even now, short service recruits with short trainings are being sent to the front lines in Ukraine and they are deserting. They are just getting overrun. So we can't afford that. The cost cutting, whatever you gain in financial terms, you will lose. You can't afford to lose your country. So we need from 4 years to 7 years. Retention is now at 25%. All the rest will just go, right? And we are told that the training period is just 6 months. It used to be almost 1 year. 1 year, and for the other arms and services, technical, it is much longer. So you cut it down to 6 months. And the simple answer is, the CO will train him. If the unit is in Siachen, in Ladakh, in counter-terrorist operations, will the CO focus on his operations or on training these people? Let us say he is a multitasking super specialist and he does all. By the time that boy is trained, he is on his way home. And you have to start training the next Agniveer all over again, right? So the fact of the matter is that we must, I will sum up the recommendations, but before that, one last factor. If an Agniveer dies in action, he gets about 98 lakhs. That is the sum given by the military armed forces to the parliament when one of the Agniveers died in the Siachen. Rahul Gandhi supposedly raised it in the parliament, but I'm afraid he did not do his homework. He did not study the facts, and he just made loose statements. He just made sloganeering he did on the parliament. I'm sorry, that does not pass for a very reasoned, measured debate like we see in the other parliaments. The fact of the matter is that he may get 98 lakhs, the Agniveer, but what does a full-fledged serving soldier get if he gets killed in action, if he is martyred? His family gets full pension for life, full medical facilities for life, full canteen facilities for life. In addition, they get about 1.5 crores in hand. The first, welfare grants and everything, that is gratuity, etc., that is given to the family. 1.5 crores plus all this. So if you are saying that the Agniveer compares, I'm sorry, that's not true. You need to check the facts again. And the second aspect is, why should we distinguish in martyrdom? You can't have two categories of martyrs. Samuel Huntington said that a nation has a soldier-state covenant. The state tells the soldier, you may be required to give up your life, you may be required to stay away from your family, lose arm, leg, hands, eyes, whatever. But don't worry. Don't look over your shoulder. We will take care of your family. I'm afraid this soldier society covenant you are violating when you go by the Agniveer. I don't think the third largest economy in the world would get beggared if you pay the Agniveer who gets killed in action, who gets martyred. The technical term is killed in action, gets the same emoluments as a serving soldier. The nation can do that much. Otherwise, what is his motivation? It is half. You made his motivation to somehow survive and get the hell out alive, not even get wounded. Those kind of guys won't fight. This is a very, very sensitive issue, and I'm certain that the government will now look into it. The army, I'm told, is carrying out a review, and we are very hopeful that these would be redressed. So in sum, what I'm not being carrying out destructive criticism, what are my suggestions? Number one, increase service from 4 years to 7 years. The color service as it was before the 71 war, right? Increase retention from just 25% to 70 to 75%. The technical arms at least have courses which are 2.5, 3 years long. How can you do those in a 3 years tenure? We are told that his annual leave is going to be cut to just 1 month. You know, when we raised this issue, 6 months training, 6 months annual leave in the balance 3 years. So he just serves for 3 years. And the pat answer that came from the proponents of the scheme was, oh no, we'll cut his annual leave by from 2 months to 1 month. I am a little disturbed. The soldier in Siachen needs 2 months. The soldier in counter-terrorist operations needs 2 months. That boy has to come, look after his sick parents, take them to a hospital, get his sister married, look after the education of his children. He needs those 2 months of leave. And to be flippant about it, cut by, it doesn't, I don't give a damn. It's a rather unhelpful attitude. We didn't have these attitudes towards our soldiers while we were in service. In fact, your commanding officer would have come upon you like a ton of bricks if you showed this kind of an attitude. I couldn't care less. I mean, the welfare is the last item required. Just go back to the Chetwood motto. It will say whatever you have to say. So, once again, 4 years to 7 years, retention 25% to 75%, and if he gets martyred, he must get the emoluments and the benefits that the family of a serving soldier gets. Thank you. Jai Bharat, Jai Hind. Please like, share and subscribe to Chanakya Dialogues.